Hey gang, welcome back. It's DrBossKey, and I thought today within Shmup Creator we would talk about the probability gameplay functionality. So in the drawer under gameplay, you have this thing called random, which is randomly starts. And what we did here is we basically set up a trigger volume, and this trigger volume is set to switch mode. And when the player goes into this trigger volume, it then triggers the various random probability trigger bits. So we have a little bit of text here that says the player's gone into the zone. Also set to switch mode. This is a nice, very quick little debugging side of things because you can go in and out of the zone many times. You can re-trigger these types of things, but you can set up your triggering conditions differently depending on what your needs are. So under the probability gameplay object, we basically have it also set to switch mode. And then you have this thing here, which is called probability. Choose randomly a number from 0 to this range. So the minimum is 2. So it's either 2 or it's 1. I'm not sure if we're counting 0, so it's but it basically comes down to like a 50% probability, right? And then here, if it does fire, because it's set to switch mode as well, then we have a little text object here, which is switch mode to play to end. Very, very short duration, but it's just again, give me a visualization of the selection here. And I just put in here on an X chance and then the number 2 here. So, and then I did the same thing here with a 3 and then a 10 and then a 50. All right. So it'd be a 1 in 50 potential chance to actually trigger that. So one thing you should know is that with the random probability, it is possible that if you set up things like this, that none of them fire, and that the triggered conditions is not true. But you could do things like set up on enemy death. Maybe you want to spawn sometimes a different variety of enemy strings or something like that. And this could set that up for you. But it is always possible that you would get a 0 dice roll, or you wouldn't get the number dice roll on any of these. So here it is in runtime mode. So in preview time in the editor, so you can see nothing fired there, nothing fired there. And in this case, 2 of the results were true. And you can see that the 1 in 10 is much harder to land because there's more potential results. So, and then the 1 in 50 is even harder. But yeah, so this is it. This kind of gives you a sense of how you can do a little bit more randomness in your own designs. And you know, the sky's the limit. There's so many things you could potentially do. Now, as a word of caution, a lot of times now you can design a shmup that uses a lot of RNG elements, right? But yeah, it creates a lot of variety or variability, and it's harder for players when things have more variability for them to respond to those variables, right? So a lot of times, like say for instance, you spawn entirely different enemy patterns based on these dice rolls, right? Then and maybe you have 50 of them. Well, now the player would have to potentially learn 50 different potential spawn scenarios for those enemies, and that means then they wind up having a lot more again, a lot more variety, but also that for instance, those enemies then have their different movement patterns. They might have different attacks, and so it makes the gameplay a lot more twitch based. So you see it and you have to respond to it, and that's raw skill, and it's much harder when you implement things like that. Depending on the game, there's always differences, right? But it's much harder to create more consistent, more consistent learnable patterns, because patterns are a big part of a lot of shmups, right? And kind of figuring out what your lines are and how to lead the player through enemy spawns. And so just keep that in mind when you're doing your own designs. But in the engine, there are opportunities, and I thought I would lay that out. So, all right, talk to you next time. Thanks, everybody.